بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين. يعني جزيل الشكر يعني للأساتذة العظام فعلا اللي احنا دايما بنتعلم منهم الأخلاق والقيم النبيلة. أستاذنا الأستاذ الدكتور طارق صفوت وأستاذنا الأستاذ الدكتور أشرف حاتم وأستاذ الدكتور عادل بيه خطاب وكل الزملاء في جمعية البرونكولوجي. يعني يمكن احنا طول عمرنا بنعتبرهم قدوة ومثل لينا وبنتعلم منهم كل حاجة جميلة دايما إن شاء الله. مؤتمر فعلا موفق وبدأ الجلسة إن شاء الله with Professor Islam Ibrahim about vaping induced lung injury. Welcome to Professor.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Good afternoon, everyone. Today's topic is very timely. You probably heard in the news the lung injury pattern with electronic cigarettes, and this is what we're going to be talking about today. Of course, for a long time we've been combating the bad effects of regular cigarette smoking. We've been trying to help people quit smoking, and the FDA had approved several products, whether it's gum, nicotine replacement, patches, varenicline, bupropion. And then this new thing came out. It came out as hopefully a replacement for combustion cigarettes. It didn't prove to be a good replacement because many people who were not actually smoking picked up the e-cigarettes because it was a cool thing to do. The simple diagram of an electronic cigarette is basically a battery and then a heater coil. And there is a wick that contains an active substance, and it is immersed in a vaping liquid, which is mostly plant oil or glycerol. And then the whole thing is heated up, and there is an aerosol that is inhaled from the mouthpiece. I think this pointer would be better. So what's in the electronic cigarette? This is what is thought to be the inner part. These are the solvents, mostly oil from plants like glycerol, propylene glycol, and then flavors. There's more than 7,000 flavors now on the market, so it's very hard to keep track. And these are the active substances. Some contain nicotine and others contain the cannabinoids, THC and CBD. The form of electronic cigarettes emerged over the years. And now we have a fourth generation that looks like a USB stick. So cool looking, very popular among young people, obviously. And these are cartridges or pods that are commercially available, made by the companies. But some other people become creative and they add their own things, probably homemade or stuff they buy on the street, illicit drugs. When they drip liquids, it's called dripping. When they add this wax-like material, mostly containing THC, it's called dabbing. So dripping and dabbing are both forms of vaping. For a long time, we knew that electronic cigarettes had substances of concern, including ethylene glycol, formaldehyde, acetaldehyde. There has been a lot of research looking into electronic cigarettes, and we knew at that time that there is some sort of immune response, including release of interleukins, cytokines, apoptosis of epithelial cells. So it's already damage recorded, but continued to be popular, especially among the young people, for a couple of reasons. Number one, it gives them the same experience as smoking a cigarette. Number two, nicotine actually reaches a peak in the serum within 5 minutes. So continue to be popular and continue to grow different brands, more than 400 different brands of electronic cigarettes, more than 7,000 flavors. And that made it very difficult for the scientific and regulatory communities to make a statement about electronic cigarettes. For a long time, nobody knew whether it was a good thing or a bad thing, because there was so many things to study. And it continued to grow in the population in the US from 1.8 in 2010 to almost 13% of the adult population were smoking electronic cigarettes. And that's more than 7-fold increase within a few years. And no wonder it also reached minors between ages 12 and 17. because of the internet and the advertisements. In 2013, it was estimated that 23 million minors have been exposed to such advertisement. And it is a very lucrative business, as you know. $1.5 billion in the US alone, and it continues to grow 24% every year. That's a lot of money. And worldwide, $10 billion business and growing. So the question is, well, these are FDA approved products, and this is the electronic cigarette that was supposed to help people quit smoking. And the question is, did it really help people smoke? In a study in New Zealand, recruited more than 600 smokers, followed them for 6 months. And the estimated rate of abstinence from combustion cigarettes was very close, 4%, 5%, 7%. So the conclusion of the study was that e-cigarettes are not really helpful. And then there was another study in the UK, recruited more people, almost 900, followed them for a whole year. And they documented a drop, about 50% drop in the use of regular cigarettes. The problem is, people were giving up one habit and picking up another form of addiction to electronic cigarettes. So electronic cigarettes continued to be used until the summer of 2019, and we developed what's called EVALI, or electronic vaping acute lung injury. This is actually a very sad case. This is the child from Illinois. There was 5 cases reported from Wisconsin, first of all, in mid-July. And then 2 weeks later, this kid from Illinois almost died from vaping. I think I have, his story was published at CNN, and I have a little video that I hope to be able to play for you. Still volume. Salt. Sound. A very sad story, طبعا, the interviewing the child himself and interviewing his family as well. His mother came out very strongly and said, "This almost killed my son, and I'm not going to keep silent." Like, there's no sound, it's okay. He was vaping for 2 years. طبعا, he never smoked before, by the way. And then he was buying THC products from the street and then adding them to his electronic cigarettes. This man is asking him, now in retrospect, don't you think this is dumb? Well, no, of course, but yeah, I was addict, and so I didn't think about it that way. All right. Can we advance? So this is the sequence of events, what really happened. Mid-July, cases in Wisconsin. And then the beautiful thing is the CDC was alerted within 2 weeks. CDC got involved with the Department of Health in both Illinois and Wisconsin and issued alerts and had an emergency center set up. And then collaboration between the FDA and the CDC. They looked back to the summer of 2019 and they did realize there was a surge of unexplained acute respiratory illnesses among young males in that period. And then reports started coming from different states. Most of them contained THC products. Now, the dilemma is, how do you define a case? And the difficulty arises from the presentation. How do these people present? They present with symptoms very similar to pneumonia. They have some respiratory symptoms, some chest pain, cough, and they have some GI symptoms, nausea, diarrhea, and they have some fever and chills. So how is that different from pneumonia? Chest x-ray looks like this could be community-acquired pneumonia, eosinophilic pneumonia, HB, who knows? So there's nothing specific about the presentation that would say, this is EVALI, I have to report it. Okay, so we got CAT scans, and we found that there's ground glass appearance, mostly involving both lungs, some consolidation at the bases as well, Something to notice also, there's some subpleural sparing. But is that characteristic of EVALI? Of course not. This could look like so many other diseases. This could be diffuse alveolar hemorrhage, this could be infectious. So between all these different patterns, we couldn't really decide of a specific pattern pathognomonic to EVALI. So we sorted out laboratory tests. Is there a lab test that can tell me, yes, this is EVALI? Of course not. The lab is not helpful. But you would run all the tests to rule out all other possibilities before you make a diagnosis of EVALI. Well, let's go one step further. Let's obtain BAL and biopsies. We looked at the BAL, and this is something I'm going to come back to, which is surprisingly, most of the cases, especially in the CDC laboratory, they analyzed BAL from 28 different cases with EVALI. All of them had this appearance. Macrophages filled with fat. So the word on the street was, well, this is lipoid pneumonia then. And that was popular for maybe like a month or so, but then it died out. So the BAL was also helpful in distinguishing that from acute eosinophilic pneumonia, because eosinophilia was not a characteristic of EVALI. Now let's go further. So physical, presentation, history, physical exam, laboratory test, BAL, we still have not made criteria so clear to make a diagnosis. So we're going for a biopsy. They biopsied 8 patients from 5 different institutions, 7 of them transbronchial biopsies, 1 surgical biopsy. All infectious workup was negative. And they all had the classic presentation and the classic chest X-ray and CT appearance. What do they find? 4 of them consistently had some form of progressive organizing pneumonia. This is a pattern of diffuse alveolar hemorrhage, as you can see, hyaline membrane depositions, and this is organization around the airways. One case, after vaping for 1 month, presented with diffuse alveolar hemorrhage. Classic. Hemoptysis on presentation, hemorrhagic BAL, classic biopsy, and appearance on CT. So that's one form of acute lung injury from vaping. A second one presented with HP-like syndrome. Classic findings on the CAT scan, nodular, ground glass, mosaic appearance, eosinophilic BAL, and the surprising thing is they respond promptly to steroids, just like HP would do. So that's another pattern. A third pattern was RBILD, respiratory bronchiolitis with the classic plugging in the airways with macrophages. Classic appearance, bronchiectatic changes, nodular ground glass appearance with air trapping in the periphery of the lungs. And when you stop the vaping, the disease went away. So that made that story more confusing. Another person was reported after 6 months of vaping to develop giant cell pneumonitis. So that didn't bring us any closer to a solution. It made things more confusing. And obviously some presented with some lipoid pneumonia as well. So diagnostic criteria could not be agreed upon. And it remained a diagnosis of exclusion. And that is a very taxing process. I'll show you why. They say, according to the CDC, to confirm a case of EVALI, you have to do the following. Number 1, the patient had been dabbing or vaping for 90 days prior to presentation, which is okay, that's fine from history. They have to present with the classic findings on chest X-ray CAT scan, that is also okay, but this is not easy to do. You have to rule out all kinds of infections. Respiratory, samples, blood cultures, BAL, looking for viruses, looking for TB, looking for bacteria, all that has to be ruled out. Number 2, you also have to rule out neoplastic diseases, rheumatologic diseases, cardiac diseases, and you tell me that doesn't come cheap. So to confirm a case, you really have to spend a lot of money. So the next best thing is probable case, where the classic presentation, history and findings on CT, but either there is some sort of infection, but you don't believe the infection is responsible for the lung injury, or you have not completed the infectious rule out process. So that's a probable case. and you still have to rule out other rheumatologic and cardiac and neoplastic diseases. As of mid-October, there was 1,479 cases reported, usually among young males, 70% of them males under the age of 35. The death toll was 33 confirmed death cases at that time. The latest I checked was November 20th, and the toll had risen to 47 deaths from eValley. We'll go back to this macro. This is the only thing that we found that is so consistent among all patients, which is the lipid-laden macrophages. So someone went into the lab to do some basic science and figured out what's going on with these macrophages. I mean, the answer to the question is there. So they exposed these mice to nicotine vapor, vehicle vapor, and also exposed them to the ENDS. ENDS are the electronic nicotine delivery systems. Surprisingly, they found that only the mice that were exposed to ENDS, electronic nicotine delivery systems, developed these lipid-laden macrophages. Those who got exposed to smoke and nicotine and vehicle vapor did not develop anything. So that has something to do with this electronic nicotine delivery system. So when they looked, there's a lot of lipid here, so the thinking was, okay, there's something in the e-cigarette that is lipoid. The plant oil that's in there has to be responsible, and that has to be a form of lipoid pneumonia. Until they went, electron microscopy confirms the presence of globules of fat within the macrophages, and then they went and measured glycerol inside the macrophages. And to their surprise, they found that the mice that were just breathing regular air had more glycerol than the mice that were exposed to ENDS, electronic nicotine delivery system. So that doesn't make sense. So it is not the glycerol that is causing this macrophages to accumulate lipids. With further analysis, they find out, spectrometry, that the type of lipids that is accumulating is consistent with surfactant lipids. So that is endogenous lipids, not exogenous. So something hurt that surfactant homeostasis. And they proposed this module here, that these are the macrophages, they have those receptors, and they respond by releasing cytokines. And that response is impaired in people who are exposed to ENDS. And also, this leads to accumulation of fat within the macrophages and within the alveolar type 2 cells. And the whole disruption of the surfactant homeostasis leads to this abnormal accumulation and injury to the macrophages. So that is the proposed model. So what is the treatment? How do you treat this? Number one, you have to stop the vaping, of course. Treatment is mostly supportive. Oxygen, if they get worse, intubation, if they get really worse, ECMO. And that happened in just one case. Antibiotics, yes, most of the time you're going to be able to differentiate between infection and non-infectious. So empiric antibiotics are okay if you're suspecting infection. Steroids, recommendation is not to use it routinely because effectiveness has not been established. But if you're desperate and the patient is getting worse, use it. If the patient is still okay, withhold. Those who've been given treatment with steroids did show a lot of improvement. Out of 92%, 65% of them improved, and I'll show you some pictures. Those who were very sick with extensive disease, within a couple of months of treatment, complete clearance. This is another patient who had extensive consolidation and ground glass, and within 10 weeks of steroid treatment, completely cured. Now, the CDC came up with this new product, vitamin E acetate, which is used in a lot of products, GI products and skin products, and people use it as a thickening agent for the THC products. They found that this was found also in all samples of the BAL taken from patients with eValley. So they didn't decide that this is the cause of the injury, but they say this is a substance of concern, and there's ongoing research now to find out what is next. So all the samples that went to the CDC, there was vitamin E acetate in all of them. recommendations from the CDC. Number one, complete cessation of all types of vaping, especially those that have THC, especially if the patient is a pregnant woman. And for those who will continue to use vaping, they should only use the commercially prepared products and not buy stuff off the street. That's the recommendation. This is the website to report cases to the CDC if you have a suspicion for a case of E. valley. They also issued a statement on how to prepare samples and how to submit to the CDC. So, in summary, we are dealing with a new disease that is not well understood. There are so many different forms of pathological injuries that is not pathognomonic to one pattern of illness. It is acute, it is severe respiratory illness, and it can lead to respiratory failure. Investigations and research are ongoing. It involves both lungs, different lung injuries, as you've seen. Remains a diagnosis of exclusion. And treatment is mostly supportive. Efficacy of steroids is not certain. The advice right now is to completely avoid vaping products. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Islam, for your interesting lecture. Now we are going to
thanks, Dr. Islam. One point you are giving interesting topic about lung injury and vaping. But now there is some report about bronchogenic carcinoma, vaping-induced bronchogenic carcinoma in rating now. And also vaping can induce brain damage and microvascular addiction. What about this?
I have no knowledge.
Disregarding this. Thank you. Welcome, our professor. Yes, welcome, professor.
our next presentation will be Heated Tobacco by Professor Tariq Safwat.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and I'm going to discuss something else. I've been in practice now for about going into more than 40 years, and this has always be a kind of debatable problem: cigarette smoking. No way out, because we've been in this society in public awareness many times. I am an anti-smoking activist, and we've been working many times in public awareness for smoking cessation, inviting stars, inviting athletics to just give a hint about smoking, about the problem of smoking. So let's discuss what's the harm reduction. That's my disclosure, epidemiology of smoking. Let's face reality. Let's face reality. In spite of all what's being doing, still smoking is on the rise. Is it due to anxiety, over stress, what we're facing in our life? So it's on the rise. If we're talking here about the gender-specific smoking prevalence across the world, we're talking about 1/5 of the population are smoking. The world population is about 7 million. We're talking about 1.25 smokers. In Egypt, I believe we're about 40% smoker among adults, ladies maybe less. And concerning the gender, the adolescents, it's 6%. We're talking about adolescents, the age from 10 to 19 years old. It's more than 6% actually. Population attributable risk associated with smoking geographic region. Our region are more attributable to risks associated with smoking. We're talking about 45% risk. Facts and numbers. So we're talking about 1.25 billion smokers, 30 million smokers added every year. We're talking about 84% of smokers live in developing countries. Africa and Middle East, which is about 1/5 of the world population, accounts for 7% of the world's total cigarette consumption. 9 out of 10 smokers cannot or not willing to quit smoking or relapse after quitting. And this is what we face really in our practice. Actually, I have a busy practice, and I always face, you tell the patient, you give them the advice, please quit, and they don't quit. And even if they quit, they come back after it. So they recur to the smoking habit. So 8 smokers die every minute. So smoking, it's a habit and it's addiction. Definitely it's addiction. It works on alpha-4 beta-2 receptor in the brain. It is addiction and it's a habit. It's a real life situation that we have to face it. We have to face how can we deal with it? How can we deal with this smoking habit? Is there a way? 70% of smokers want to quit, and we face it. We face it in our practice. He comes and he's begging you, I want to quit. Unfortunately, only 5% quit without help, and chapeau for them if they can quit the 5%. The majority of smokers make 5 to 7 attempts before they succeed. So nicotine definitely is an addiction. It's the reason so many smokers keep smoking even when they want to quit. So we have to give them a doctor motivation, and that's what we're doing in our daily practice. Please quit, please quit. And any triggers, he has a problem with his wife, he has a problem with his family, with his friends, he starts again into going back into the triggers, and he goes back to smoke. Because of our life, the overstress we're living in it. So that's one of the major causes. So nicotine is naturally present in tobacco. Nearly all nicotine used today comes from natural sources, though not risk-free. It's not risk-free, of course. It's not the primary cause of smoking-related diseases. It's primarily the toxins which are in the smoke and carcinogen in tobacco smoke, not the nicotine that cause illnesses and death. And that's what the NICE Public Health Guidance Tobacco Harm Reduction Approach to Smoking by the Royal College of Physicians, the FDA, and the Public Health of England. They report this. So nicotine is not the problem. The problem is the carcinogen, the carbon monoxide, nitrosamines, the benzpyrenes, etc. So the Public Health of England, nicotine is not a significant health hazard, doesn't cause cardiac events. We know that you can have a little bit of acute event, a little bit of rise of pulse, a little bit of rise of blood pressure, and there is inadequate evidence that nicotine can cause cancer. So why is harm reduction needed? Harm reduction is a strategy used in medicine. It's a social policy to minimize harm to individuals and or wider society from hazardous behaviors or practices that cannot be completed or prevented. Syringes, drugs, alcohol. So we're talking about this. Examples, you wearing protective clothing for sports, seat belts, laws against drunk driving. So we have a lot of harm reduction in different aspects. For instance, clean needles and surgery to IV user to avoid HIVs, etc. Safe sex, alcohol driving law, protective clothing sports like seat belts, sugar substitutes, hyposensitization for asthma allergies, morbidity and bariatric surgeries, nicotine replacements like THR, tobacco harm reduction, methadone for opiate for those who have morphine addicts. So why not? We're not doing this for smoking. We need something as a harm reduction for heavy smokers. So harm reduction, quitting, definitely, we totally agree, 100% quitting smoking is the best option. There's no disagreement around that. It's 100%. But for patients that do not quit, they are unable to quit, we need to explore alternatives that can help lessen the harm. So if, for a population benefit, you have a reduced risk product, and it's accepted by the patient, or the COPD patient, or the cancer patient, etc., is accepted by the person who is a chain smoker as a habit, and for his nicotine addiction, we can have a successful harm reduction that requires the current adult smokers be offered a range of reduced risk products so that consumer acceptance can be best fulfilled. And this is what's from the Tobacco Act, third edition, American Cancer Society in 2009, and submitted presentation in November 2013. So what's our strategy for those patients unable to quit? Is there any way for harm reduction? The heated tobacco products, no combustion, And what we're doing here, that we know the tip of the cigarette, the temperature reaches more than 700 degrees centigrade. So if you reduce, whenever you reduce it below this 300 or 400, you don't get the combustion and you don't get the tar and carbon monoxide, more or less. We know that we have more than 7,000 constituents identified in cigarette smoke. About 100 of these constituents are categorized as harmful, potentially harmful constituents. And most of these harmful constituents are formed when the tobacco burns. So it's the problem of burning the tobacco, not heating the tobacco. So if we're looking here, that's the highest, burning the highest temperature, and whenever you go down less than 400 degrees, you get more or less a decrease in the problem of the constituents, the carcinogenic problems, the carbon monoxide and tar, etc. This was the FDA Southeast Tobacco Laboratory tested on the heat tobacco in October 2017. I just want to report it. Okay? And it showed that, and this is from the FDA, that you get more than 90% in all these toxic products with the nitrosamine, more than 90% and more than 98% in different studies. So that was an FDA tested, the Southeast Tobacco Laboratory tested heat tobacco in October 2017. And this as well, it's an FDA showing 18 of the toxics, it went down to 90%. Philip Morris showed 58 chemicals, including the 18 and the carcinogens as well. They went down more than 90 and 95% reduction. And this shows, this is an interesting fact, they comparing a combustible cigarette with a filter here, which shows after one cigarette how it's brown, and this is with the heated tobacco, it's more or less the, I don't mean that it's 100% safe, but you're talking about more than 90% safer products than the combustible cigarettes. So the conclusion of the FDA on this heated tobacco, the studies do not demonstrate reduction in long-term disease risks. As we all know, we don't have results. Even the iPhone we're all using. Do you know the harm of the iPhone after 10 years, 20 years? Are you going to develop any kind of Alzheimer's? So we don't have these studies, but we're talking about the recent studies. So the studies do not demonstrate reduction in long-term disease risks, but the evidence indicates that the conventional cigarette smokers who switch completely to the heat tobacco will have reduced toxic exposures, and this is likely to lead to less risk of tobacco-related disease. I believe this can help, and this is what the FDA permitted the sale of the tobacco heated systems through pre-market tobacco product, and this was delivered in April 2019, and they authorized the marketing of the heated tobacco as appropriate for the protection of the public health. That's an FDA report. These are all the stuff, the smokeless tobacco snus is very popular in Sweden, the heated tobacco, novel nicotine products, etc. And the vape, which was introduced by my dear friend Islam. This is one of the device which they call IQOS. I'm not promoting the IQOS, but just to show it for those who are not popular or don't know about it. The snus, what's the snus? The snus, that's المضغة بتاعت النيكوتين. It's used in Sweden. Why I'm showing this? In the snus, the first modifier for this tobacco product claim using general snus. It's very popular in Sweden, by the way. Colombian dough in nicotine. Using general snus instead of cigarettes put you at a lower risk of mouth cancer, heart disease, lung cancer, stroke, emphysema, and chronic bronchitis. That was from the Global State of Tobacco Harm Reduction. And this is why I showed this. It shows that the least prevalence of smoking in the EU if you go to Europe, the least population smoking are the Swedish, because they use the snus. They are madgali. So if you're talking, they smoke about 5 cigarettes a day, compared like France, more than 1 pack a day, etc. And it shows the level of people, the ladies and men using the snus. And this shows the death rate attributed to tobacco of all causes of death, men 30 years and older. The least population having a mortality were in Sweden, 150 about mortality due to tobacco per 100,000 population. So less than any other countries in the EU. And this is what related to some nicotine replacement, which is the chewable snus. Now, showing you some of the data, the economists, No Smoke Why the Fire, Faut-il candle le cigarette, it's a French, are we going to be afraid, or we should be afraid from the e-cigarettes, Chinese, Japan, and smoking, vaping, and nicotine. And Zeller is the director of the Center of Tobacco Product of the FDA. And just to keep on, and many public health experts agree that non-combustible products are likely significantly less hazardous than cigarettes. And this was from the Public Health of England. And just to read this, no smoke hence evidence of risk of passive smoking irrelevant. Partners of vapors, this is what they mentioned in the Public Health of England. Partners of vapors had cotinine concentration about 1,000 times less than the concentration seen in smokers. So the second-hand smoke is less. Any health risk of passive exposure likely extremely low, and use of e-cigarettes leads to normalization of e-cigarettes not smoking. This is what they mentioned, that those who smoke, they will keep on their e-cigarettes if they smoke, and it's only related to the smokers, not for those going into to practice this. The evidence does not support, the Public Health of England, the evidence does not support the concern that e-cigarettes are a route into smoking among young people. That's what they mentioned. Youth smoking rates in UK continue to decline. Regular use is rare and is almost entirely confined to those who have smoked. I mean, if I'm a non-smoker, I wouldn't go into an e-cigarette if I'm a non-smoker. I wouldn't go into vaping. You need public awareness. You need awareness from the family, your father and mother, to just give you a proper pathway, to give you a good instruction. So that was the Public Health of England in 2018. The UK Center for Tobacco and Alcohol Studies made the same comments, and the Royal College of Physicians that the risk was unlikely to exceed 5%. And this is what happens. Definitely, if you quit smoking, that's the best alternative, if you totally quit. But if you switch to relative risk products, you go into a complication definitely less than keeping on smoking. And maybe switching to relative risk product, it is more or less, I don't say the best thing is to complete cessation of smoking, but it can be more or less a little bit approximating the cessation. But preferably, again, just nobody be confused, the best thing is to quit totally. That's the Mitch Zeller. He's an FDA, US FDA concerned of the tobacco control. And he mentioned in one of the congressional hearings in 2014, if we could get all those people who wouldn't quit, that we face every day in our clinics, if we could get all those people to completely switch all of their cigarettes to non-combustible products, it would be good for public health. That was his comment, Zeller, in one of the congressional hearings. So, the patch to harm reduction, the best thing please quit smoking, don't smoke. That's 100%, we totally agree on that. If you can't, and you have this nicotine in your brain, you can't stop it, so kick the habit, assist to cessation, nicotine replacement, etc. And then you can, if it doesn't work, you have the harm reduction. Treattobacco.net, that's a site, a website, and it's by the Society for the Study of Addiction. What's the policy? Cessation attempts could be increased and smoking-related harm reduced by providing indication for nicotine replacement therapy that includes concurrent use while reducing cigarette consumption. This was one of the comments. Harm reduction approaches can reduce the harm caused by tobacco use for those who cannot or will not stop. The term harm reduction covers a variety of approaches aimed at reducing the harm of tobacco from tobacco use. So we have two categories here, tobaccologist and pulmonologist. We all are. What we mean by tobaccologist, that he is very sharp, you have to quit. You have to amputate this habit. Pulmonologist, that's what we're doing in our practice. So we have two visions and we have two objectives. Tobaccologists focus on behavior. Objective, eradicate smoking. No smoking whatsoever. No smoking indoors, no smoking in the malls, no smoking everywhere. You have to amputate this habit. By how they approach it? By pricing, taxes, to ban it, no contact with tobacco industry. Okay? Good luck. We're raising the price of the cigarettes, and the kids and the adolescents and the youngsters, they smoke. Banning, I'm talking about my country here in Egypt. Can we ban it in indoors, in the hotels, in the malls? That's a major problem, and we have to make a lot of effort for public awareness at this point. The pulmonologists that we are here and oncologists focus on the harms from the behavior. So our objective is definitely to eradicate smoking. We totally agree about that, but we have to eradicate smoking-related cancers and deaths. We treat this. We approach, we have to mention to the patient, please quit, and every time he's coming to the clinic, please beg him to quit smoking. However, less harmful alternatives to smoking combustible cigarettes can be introduced here. And that's my last slide. What's our recommendation here of the Society of the Study for Addiction? A range of indicated uses for treatments should be offered that is consistent with the evidence on efficacy, scientific understanding of the nature of tobacco use and relapse and consumer choice. A second point, which is quite important, regulatory barriers should be reformed. For example, access to treatment products is much more restricted than its access to tobacco products for those unable to quit. So you can buy whatever you want. You can buy marijuana, you can buy, I have near my house, and I want to mention that near my house, I have a booth of cigarettes. They sell the cigarettes, and they sell as well the marijuana. And to make more funny as well, the Minister of the Environment is facing this kiosk where they sell, والنائب العام عبد المجيد محمود كان سابقا وهو ما زال. I mean, we have to restrict. If we're going to restrict, we have to restrict everything. Campaigns should be increased the public awareness of the benefits of quitting and the options available as a replacement. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Tarek, for your interesting presentation. Our next presentation will be nicotine replacement therapy by Professor Asim Al-Asawi.
مساء الخير. معلش انا عارف ان اخر برزنتيشن بعد كده عندنا البرونكو كاب، فان شاء الله we'll be ready للماتش ونشوف المتنافسين ان شاء الله مع الاستاذ دكتور عادل خطاب. وبشكر طبعا الحضور ما شاء الله يعني، وبشكر الاستاذ الدكتور اشرف حاتم والاستاذ الدكتور احمد الحلفاوي للتنظيم. التوك بتاعتي النهارده النيكوتين ريبليسمنت ثيرابي. احنا بنتكلم في التوباكو مينلي، احنا بنتكلم في اي كونتنت بتاع السيجاريت هو النيكوتين and الاذرز دي يعني about 4000 chemicals منهم proved 52 carcinogenic. ايه مشكله النيكوتين بير سي؟ النيكوتين whenever the patient inhale cigarette smoke absorb من ال large surface area of the lung, reach the brain, stimulate the alpha-4 beta-2 nicotine receptors, lead to release of dopamine. And release of dopamine ده is sense of pleasure. This is the main problem of the patient. Later on, continuous smoking will lead to the development of nicotine hunger. Nicotine hunger, this is the main problem. انه زي العيان اللي بيعمل دايت ونفر ان هو بيدخل ان هو يحاول يعمل الدايت later on بيفيل. برضه ده ليه؟ علشان النيكوتين hunger whenever he is subjected to a clue related to the smoking he is usually smoke. فهو البيشنت بيبقى in between both. mainly ده related لثلاث حاجات: الايموشن والموتيفيشن والميموري. فالبيشنت بتاعنا بيبقى يوجوالي في الدايلما بين الديفكت في الايموشنز والموتيفيشن والميموري whenever he quit النيكوتين. وده اللي خلانا نقول ان هو بيحس بالظبط كده there is someone in my head but it is not me. هو ده العين whenever he feel ان هو بيحاول يكوت هو بيحس بالمشكله دي فبيرجع تاني. on long term changes اللي بتحصل increase in neuronal absorption, increase the density of the nicotine receptors. ودي مشكله كبيره قوي بتواجه البيشنت. الفيرنكتين بيحلها بس whenever البيشنت بيفايت برضه بيرجع تاني بيفايت ان هو يكوت بيرجع تاني للسموكينج. increase in sensitivity of the receptors وكمان النيورونال بروتين سنسز increase والنيوروترانسميتر سنسز increase. ده اللي يخلي العيان بتاعنا يوصل لحاجه اسمها disorder of compulsion. ان هو بيهيت وفي نفس الوقت بيلاف التدخين. كلنا بنسمعها من البيشنتس بتوعنا: انا بحب التدخين although ان هو بيفايت ونفسه يبطل التدخين. فده هو ده شكل البيشنت بتاعنا whenever ان هو بيحاول ان هو يبطل لوحده فبيوصل للفير ان هو cannot quit alone. طيب سموكينج سيشن بريفنشن هي بالفعل بنقلل الكريفنج بالسيمتومز. اهم حاجه ان بنحاول نساعد البيشنت بتاعنا ان هو يبيلد هيز كونفيدنس، ان هو يبقى قادر يكومبرومايز مع الويدرول سيمتومز. بنموتيفيت العيان بس وي كانت فورس العيان زي ما كتير قوي بنشوفهم من البيشنتس ان هم عايزين اهلهم يبطلوا. ما نقدرش نساعد واحد ما عندوش الويل ان هو يجو اون للبروسيس بتاع السموكينج سيسيشن. موضوعنا النهارده هو عن النيكوتين ريبليسمنت ثيرابي. وي هاف two form of nicotine replacement therapy: the transdermal approach اللي هي زي الباتش والاكيوت سيستم اللي هم بيريليف الويدرول سيمتومز. هم انواع كتيره قوي هندخلهم يعني الديتيلز بتاعتهم بسيطه. الانديكيشنز هو اول حاجه ان هي بتقلل الويدرول سيمتومز ودي مهمه جدا جدا. whenever any type of drug واحنا بنستخدمه لو انا استخدمته معاه الويدرول سيمتوم النيكوتين ريبليسمنت ثيرابي بتقلل لي الويدرول سيمتومز، بتخلي العيان يبطل وقت من الاوقات. يعني احنا لما بنستخدم الجام بقول للبيشنت انت مش هتدخن for a couple of hours فده كويس. reduce السموكينج until we achieve الكويت. بس هي ما بتمنعش الريلابس، وفي الاسف ما اقدرش منتين هنشوف ستادي واحده بس كملوا لغايه 52 اسبوع وما لقوش ايفكت منها ان يخلوا البيشنس يقدر يبطل. نوت كونترا انديكيتد، بس ببقى كوشس جدا في العيان بتاع ستيبل كارديوفاسكولار ديزيز بريجنسي وبريست فيلينج از كاتيجوري دي. طيب الفورم اوف نيكوتين ريبليسمنت ثيرابي الجام، وهي دي الافيلبل في مصر ومش ان اوفيشال واي للاسف. يعني الباتش، نيزل سبراي، الانهيلر، اللاسنجز، وفي ممكن نستخدم ده. طيب احنا ايه الفرق بين النيكوتين ريبليسمنت ثيرابي والنيكوتين في السيجاريت؟ هو السمول دوز. الفكره بتاعت السمول دوز وان هو ما بيوصلش للبيك زي ما هنشوف السلايد اللي جايه، فبالتالي البيشنت ما بيحسش بالwithdrawal symptoms until we achieve التارجت كويت ديت. ده الفرق بين السيجاريت ان هي فيها بيك، تمام؟ سوري ده الفرق بين السيجاريت ان هي فيها بيك، تمام؟ والتو لاينز التانيين هم ما بيوروش البيك اللي هو لو شفنا دوت. ده للجم، تمام؟ وده للباتش، فما عنديش بيك، العيان ما بيوصلش بيك زي السيجاريت الودن الاول 10 سكندز العيان بيحس البيك بتاع الدوبامين ريليز والبلاجر. في الجام والباتش هي ايه؟ كونتينوس بروسيس. طيب الباتش هي اكتر حاجه بتساعد العيانين بتوعنا، بس زي ما قلنا ان هي مشكلتها ان هي مش افيلبل في الماركت. بنستارت بالهاي دوز وجرادولي بنديكريز الدوز، بناخد من 8 to 10 ويكس. سكسس ريت بتاعها كويس جدا. العيان بيبقى بيفيل بيبقى يعني الكومبلاينس بتاعه عالي جدا معاها. ونيفر هو بيفيل الارج لان هو السموك بنقول له جاست راب الباتش وهتحسسك بالبليجر بتاع النيكوتين ريليز. فده بيبقى فتره بنقلل الاماونت اوف كونسنتريشن بتاعت النيكوتين جرادولي. الجم وزي ما قلنا هو ده الافيلبل ان اور ماركت 2 و4 مللي جرام، وبدي 4 مللي جرام للعيانين اللي باكثر من 25 سيجاره يوميا، ال 2 مللي جرام للاقل من 25 سيجاره بير داي. اهم حاجه ان انا بقول للعيان ان هو بيشو وبارك، يعني هو بيمضخها ويركن زي ما الدكتور طارق قال لنا على المضغه، هي بيركنها ان بتوين الجام والتشيك، وبالتالي تقلاو الابزوربشن بتاع النيكوتين، وده within مثلا 15 minutes بينقلها للناحيه الثانيه، وهي بتاخد اراوند 1 اور. المين ديس ادفانتج بتاعتها اللي هي الكومبلاينس، بس انا بشوف برضو لو احنا فضلنا مع البيشنت اللي هي دي الاونلي افيلبل ان اور ماركت. فلكسبل دوز، وانا بقدر ازود وجرادولي اقلل الاماونت اوف سيجاريت. يعني عيان بيشرب 25 سيجاره بدخل بالنيكوتين ونبدا نقلل النمبر اوف سيجاريت بير داي until we achieve التارجت كويت داي. يوجوالي هي بتبقى افكتيف مع الاذر فورم اوف دراجز سواء الفيرنيكلين او البروبروبين ايام ما كان موجود. بعد كده عندنا النيكوتين سبراي. النيكوتين سبراي هي ال1 دوز بتدي 1 مللي جرام نيكوتين. السايد افكتس مين هي الكاف والنيزل والثروت اريتيشن. برضه هي فلكسبل، بتبقى رابيدلي ابزورب، بس بيحصل منها تولرنس وهي اكسبنسيف. الانهيلر هي الفكره فيها برضه دي، انا بينهيل النيكوتين بس ان سمول دوز. يعني السيجاره ال1 باف فيها 100 مايكرو جرام، النيكوتين انهيلر فيها 13 مايكرو جرام، فهي فيري ليتل دوز ان كومباريزون. وبس هي برضه كذلك هي فلكسبل، وبس بالستاديز كلها لقوا ان الانهيلر نوت افكتيف. اللاسنجز كانت موجوده شويه، هي فيها ال1 وال2 وال4 مللي جرام. مشكلتها اكتر حاجه اللي هي مع العيانين بيحسوا بيها ان هي ميزه اللي هي ثروت اريتيشن اللي بيحصل، بس هي دي one of its main problem. دي one of the studies اللي كانت على الكومباينيشن اللي هم سوري المينتنس والاكستندد. يعني هو يوجوالي احنا بنستخدم ال 8 ويكس، ممكن بالستدي دي عملوا اكستنشن ل 24 ويكس اب تو 52 ويكس من النيكوتين ريبليسمنت ثيرابي ان ذا فورم اوف باتش، ولقوا ان هي هي beyond the 24 weeks there is no effect ان انا ازود اكتر من ال 24 weeks. بس كانوا اكتر من البيشنتس كانوا maintained قدروا ان هم يكويت باي الكونتينوس على الباتش. هل انا ممكن استخدم نيكوتين ريبليسمنت ثيرابي باذر يعني كومباينيشن؟ دي كان كوهيرنت ستادي فيها اكثر من 50,000 بيشنت اللي استخدموا اكثر من فورم اوف نيكوتين ريبليسمنت ثيرابي، والسكسس ريت بتاعهم كان اعلى بكتير من اللي كان بيستخدم. يعني اللي بيستخدم الباتش ان هي بتدي سلو ريليز وذ لونج بيريد اوف تايم، مع الحاجات اللي هي رابيد اونست اوف اكشن زي الجام او النيزل سبراي اللي بتدي رابيد اونست اوف اكشن فبتقلل الويدرول سيمبتومز. اخر حاجه اللي هو يوجوالي نقدر انكارج البيشنت اللي هو موتيفيت البيشنت كويت، اللي هو البنفيتس اوف كويتنج قد ايه ان الكويتنج اوف سموكينج هيساعد البيشنت بتاعنا، ودي اكتر حاجه بتموتيفيت البيشنت، وان هو يفضل يعد هو وصل لفين whenever he reach the target quit date. And thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hassan. Unfortunately, there is no time for discussion, and now great thanks for the board of Bronchology Society, and we will go to the last match of the Bronco Cup with Dr. Adel Khattab and for University now, please. Hall E now.